I used to be so incredibly terrified of even the idea of confrontation. I used to think that if I had a disagreement with someone, that meant that I was going to lose their respect or lose their love or lose their affection, that I was going to basically shun them from my life because we disagreed on a particular thing. And it didn't even have to be big things. Like, I can understand if you have a disagreement about big issues, but even little things. So I was such a yes girl and such a people pleaser. And it killed me because very often I knew I had some ideas that were worth exploring, or I knew I had something to contribute, but I was so afraid to appear disagreeable or to cause any kind of conflict or friction that I would stay quiet, shut up, and not say anything. Does that sound familiar? I know a lot of people out there who struggle with this idea of being assertive, but I also know that we tend to misunderstand some of these key concepts that have to do with leadership and communication and that can elevate our communication and therefore our leadership. And so, what I would love to do today in this episode of Sincerely Speaking is tackle this notion of what being assertive really looks like, what it really means. How can you show up assertively without being pushy or offensive? And what are the steps to elevate our level of assertiveness, to increase our level of assertiveness, so that we can communicate more effectively, so that we can be more direct and open without feeling this dread or this anxiety that we are going to cause some sort of break or friction in the relationships if we do this. In fact, after today's conversation, I hope you'll see that being assertive is essential to having meaningful, deep, connected relationships. So, are you ready for this conversation about assertiveness? You need confidence to move forward. Without confidence, you can't really achieve that dream, desire, calling, or lofty element, venture that you've had in your heart to do. Have you heard that before? That's what most experts and gurus out there sell you. Well, I have a slightly different take on it. I believe that you and I can create a feeling and a sense of confidence on demand that can propel us forward without us having to jump through all the hoops and try to figure out all the things that the gurus never really tell you how to do anyway. So if you have been struggling with this notion that you need more confidence, or if you simply have a goal, a dream, an aspiration, a movement, something that you want to start in this world, an impact that you want to have in others, and an influence that you want to use to support and help and do some good out there in the world, then I invite you to head on over to confidence.marciamaro.com, where you are going to find an amazing offer for my course, Confidence on Demand, which will give you the 3 secrets to generating that feeling and that sense of confidence when and where you need it. So again, head on over to confidence.marciamaro.com and take advantage of this opportunity to generate and create confidence when and where you need it. And in the meantime, stick around and chat with me here on Sincerely Speaking. See you soon. So, most people think assertive means that you stand your ground and you don't budge. That being assertive is like that fine line between being obstinate, right, and almost rude and offensive, and being clear and decisive on what you want to express. Well, the reality of it is that assertiveness is a continuum. There is a continuum that spans from being fully passive, which I call being a floor mat, right? Not me, but which I equate to being a floor mat. And the other extreme of that continuum is being extremely aggressive, which is like being a bulldozer, right? So you can go all the way from floor mat to bulldozer in the assertiveness scale or continuum. But somewhere near the middle, there's a sweet spot that is what we should be thinking about when we think about assertiveness. The problem is we tend to think about assertiveness as being more towards the aggressive side, right? So we think that to be assertive, we have to be rude, or that to be assertive, we have to be unmoving or closed off or stubborn. And that in order to be assertive, we have to be willingly offensive or just flat out in people's faces. And that is not the case. See, assertiveness is really this sweet spot in which we have moments of vulnerability, but also moments of strength, in which we understand what it is we stand for, but we also understand that other people believe what they believe because they think it's right, and that nobody is going to push for something that they don't believe in. And so we give space for our belief and space for other people's beliefs. And we do it in such a way that we are not wavering or pandering all the time, but we are aware of the fact that we don't have all the answers, that we don't know all the truth, that there's no monopoly on good ideas, and that the other person might actually have a point or two that we should consider. And so assertiveness is not about being that bulldozer that is just flattening out everybody else and everybody else's ideas and opinions, but it's also not about being this floor mat that lets everybody walk all over them. There is a middle ground. And when we can understand and reach that middle ground, that is when we can live in assertiveness. So the question that we're asking ourselves today is, do I really need to be more assertive? Well, I would like to qualify that. I would, instead of asking, do I really need to be more assertive? I would ask, how can I be more effectively assertive? More effectively assertive. And I am going to explain what I mean by that in a minute. But the thing is, it doesn't matter what we're talking about. All extremes have the possibility of being damaging, right? If you don't exercise at all, that can be bad. If you exercise too much, that can also be bad, right? So you need to find that balance, that middle ground. I think that's one of the reasons why work-life balance has become such a um, catchphrase, right? Something that people are always talking about and looking for. And we will have an episode on work-life balance because it's a myth. I'm just going to throw that out there. Tell me in the comments if you agree, but we will have an episode on that coming up. But right now, I just want us to understand this, right? That balance is the ideal for most things in life, right? I hate absolutes. So I just gave you one, but for the most part, you're going to hear me say things in a way that are not completely absolute yes or no, but that make room for the fact that I don't know it all. Right. And that is one of the things that I understand. I don't know it all. I don't want to know it all. It would be horrible if I knew it all, I think. So, no, I don't know it all. So I give room for that. But the fact is that for most of us, being assertive is not a matter of being more assertive necessarily. Right. There are going to be moments in which we do need to be more outwardly assertive, where we need to express more assertiveness, where we need to show up more assertively, right? But it's not necessarily about being more assertive all the time or about being less assertive. It's about knowing when to exercise more assertiveness and when to exercise less assertiveness, how to play within that continuum, right? There are moments in our lives when we are going to have to lean more towards the passive in order to gain ground, in order to achieve what we're looking for, in order to get to where we want to get to. I'll give you an example. If I am looking for mentorship, right? And I am looking for someone who is a strategist, an expert, or a coach to help me do something that I am not good at, that I am looking to improve on, right? And I show up with this huge level of assertiveness that says, you know what I need to learn. I know what I need to do. You need to teach me this, and this is the way it's going to go, right? How far am I going to get? Am I going to get the results I'm after? Now, that doesn't mean I'm going to take everything they say at face value and not examine and question and be clear on how whatever they're teaching me fits in with my values and the way that I am and the goals that I have. But it does mean that I get to move a little bit more towards the passive side, add a little bit more vulnerability and a little bit more submission to that relationship so that I can gain the expertise that I hired them for in the first place, right? Because when I hire a mentor or when I hire an expert or a coach or a strategist, I am assuming that there are things they know that I don't. And I have to start by understanding that they are going to teach me things that I didn't know I needed to know, that they know things at the visceral level that I don't yet know. And so that's why I'm hiring them. And so I need to move away from trying to be more assertive in that relationship and more towards being more submissive and more passive in that relationship in the sense of receiving, right? But if I am the coach, if I am the person that is mentoring you, then you can expect that I will add assertiveness to what I am saying because I understand that, like I say all the time, and I learned from one of my mentors, you can't lead from the middle of the road. Right. And you are not going to follow someone that's wishy washy and that doesn't take a stand and that doesn't tell you what they believe is in your best interest to learn and do. So I would move more towards the assertive side in that particular interaction, that particular relationship, right? So it's a matter of understanding the context, understanding the situation, and knowing what that situation calls for so that the best possible resolution for everybody involved can be reached, right? Assertiveness is ultimately about understanding your rights and also understanding that whatever is a right for you is a right for everybody else around you as well. So it's about understanding and respecting that in order for my rights to be respected, I have to respect yours. And I'm not going to go around allowing everybody else's opinions and thoughts and ideas to shift what I believe and what I think and what I know to be true in my heart. But I'm also not going to go around expecting to shift everybody else's thoughts and opinions and ideas and what they know in their hearts to be true. Yes, we will have conversations and we will talk about that in the steps that we're going to be looking at. But and there are moments for shifting and for being open and for understanding that, like I said before, I don't have monopoly on good ideas and knowledge. I don't know it all. So there is a possibility, and actually a rather large one, that the person I'm talking to knows something that I don't. And I have to be open and accepting of that possibility. But that also doesn't mean that I am going to be swaying like a wave with everything that everybody says. And this person says that, oh yeah, I agree with that. And this person says this, I think, oh no, I agree with that too. Take a stand. And that's a big part of assertiveness is knowing where you stand and why you stand for it. Right. I used to always tell my kids that it didn't do me or them or anybody any favors if I pushed my beliefs on them. That ultimately, whatever they say they believe, they have to be able to defend and understand why they believe it, right? In biblical terms, we call that apologetics. So you have to be able to defend what you believe and why you believe it. And that's a big part of assertiveness as well. So let's get right into the steps because I think we've clarified the concept, right? So assertiveness is about knowing where you stand and why, and being willing to defend that stance in a conversation while at the same time respecting and understanding that the other person might have a different perspective or point of view, and they also have the right to be heard and to believe what they believe, right? It's about hearing and being heard. It's about validating that others believe what they believe because they have a good cause to believe it, right? And it's also being able to validate yourself enough to know that you don't have to agree with everybody else, that it's okay to be the only one who believes what you believe as long as you're clear on why you believe it. Got it? All right. So let's go to the steps. So the first step is understanding your intention. Understanding your intention. And if you've followed me for any length of time, you know I'm a big proponent of the fact that there's no leadership without self awareness. There is no way that you can effectively lead others and have them follow you willingly if you're not aware of yourself, of how you show up, of what your values are, of what you are telling yourself, the stories that you tell yourself, and the ultimate intention that you have, what your desired outcomes are. So, in any interaction, in order for us to get to the ideal level of assertiveness in our continuum, we have to start from understanding our own intentions and what we're bringing to the table so that we know where we should stand on that continuum in order to get the best results possible. And yes, you could use this to manipulate people, but that's why we're starting with intention. Because if your intention is to get your own way, then you're going to end up bulldozing people. And that is not what this conversation is about. And that is not what you should be aiming for. And I believe that if you listen to me, then you know that it's all about service and it's all about the win-wins. In fact, win-win-win, right? For everybody involved. And it's about, yes, standing your ground and standing for your values, but it's also about understanding that other people have the right to do so as well, right? And we already talked about this. So when you understand your intention, when you start from the space of self-awareness and you know what values are you bringing into the conversation, what stories are you telling yourself about this interaction or this conversation, what is it that you are expecting that maybe you haven't communicated is your expectation? Or what is it that maybe you are assuming that you haven't confirmed, right? And we have talked about all of these things in other episodes, and we will talk about it again. And most importantly, what it is that is your desired outcome from this interaction. And what I mean by that is, do I want this conversation to be about just making sure that you hear me and I hear you, and we are getting closer to understanding each other? Because that is going to be a completely different approach from, we've already talked about this 20 times, and this is the moment to make a decision. So my intention, my desired outcome is that by the end of this conversation, we will have clear steps that we're going to follow moving forward in order to create the solution for the situation. We are going to have a plan to fix this, right? So whatever your intention is going to help you determine where in that continuum should you fall. Is it really about being more assertive at this point? Or is it about being more open and more vulnerable? Is it about being more of in a listening space? Although listening is always important. Or is it more about being in a space where you are directing, where you are delegating and moving people forward and propelling them to action? What is it that you're trying to do as part of this interaction? What is it that you want to see at the end, right? What is your intention? What is your desired outcome for this interaction? And then where on that spectrum do you believe you get to be in order to get further towards that desired outcome or towards that intention, right? Then the second step is to assume positive intent. That is the second step. And what I mean by assuming positive intent is, yes, assumptions generally speaking are bad. But if we start an interaction from the assumption that the other person is going to attack us, or from the assumption that the other person doesn't have our best interest at heart, or that they're selfish and they only want their own way, and that they are not going to be willing to listen to our stance or our position because their only concern is for their own well-being, then we're going to enter the conversation not just from a bulldozing standpoint, aggressive, but we're going to get in there defensively, which blocks us from listening, which keeps us from being able to be fully open and to even see a grain of truth in what the other person is saying. And that is going to make the communication so strained and so difficult and so heavy that the chances of you getting anywhere are going to be slim to none. Because when you approach a conversation from that assumption that the other person is attacking you and you need to defend yourself, then you're going to stick your foot in the mud. Like, you're going to just stand there and build a fortress around yourself, and you're not going to budge. And that is going to lead the other person to do the same. They're going to sense it right away. And their reaction 99.9% of the time is going to be to respond in like, and they are going to just cement themselves in their opinion, just ground themselves there and not budge. So when you can assume positive intent, when you can assume that the only reason you should have any kind of interaction is if you truly believe that there's a possibility that you and the other people involved might have similar interest, or might have the same ultimate desire, might ultimately want the same thing or similar things. When you can assume that people come into the conversations with the best of intentions, really wanting a win-win for everybody, and really wanting everybody to walk out feeling heard and respected and validated as human beings, then you can have a whole other level of assertiveness, because then you're not afraid to speak out in the way that you should. And we will talk more about that in a minute. But the third step is understanding that what you permit persists. What you permit persists. So when we talk about floor mats, the floor mats permit everybody's rights to be violated. The floor mats permit their own rights to be violated, and they permit for less than ideal situations to become norm. So if you want to change that, the main thing is to not allow anybody's rights to be infringed, I'm sorry, or violated in any way, shape, or form. So if you feel like your rights are being violated, you don't have to take it and you shouldn't take it. And you have the right to say, okay, I feel like at this point the conversation is becoming offensive towards me, or it's becoming an attack to my person, and I don't need to put up with this. So we have one more opportunity to shift this. If I continue to feel this way, I am going to stand up and walk away. But then you get to actually follow through. Yes. And you get to have a conversation about what it is that is making you feel uncomfortable or offended or in any way mistreated in the conversation, right? But it also means that if you at any point perceive that somebody else's rights are being violated in any way, infringed upon, then you get to speak up and say, wait, 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 this is not the way we should be talking to anybody. And in particular, I feel like this conversation is leaning towards an attack against so and so. And I don't think that's right. So let's shift this. Let's make it more productive. And if we can't, then I am going to suggest that we stop the conversation here and pick it up at some other time when we're ready to respect everybody, right? Hear the assertiveness there. And it's not about getting my way, it's about making sure that everybody is being respected and heard and given the chance to be understood, right? Not everybody's going to understand everybody. That's a fallacy, it's a fantasy, but at least be given the chance to be understood, right? So that's the third step in the process. After you understand your intention and you're clear on what you're coming into the conversation with, and you're clear that you're in the right space to have the conversation in the first place, then you go into it assuming positive intent. And then you understand that what you permit persists, and you make it a point to not permit anything that is going to infringe upon or violate anybody's rights, yours or anybody else's, right? Then the fourth step, and this is what most people go straight to when they talk about assertiveness, but they also talk about it in a way that makes it seem like you can't waver and you have to always be strong and it has to be almost forceful in the way that you communicate. And that's not what it is, right? The fourth step is to speak honestly and directly. In other words, say what you mean and mean what you say. And I want to explain a little bit what I mean by speaking directly, because I think we tend to confuse being direct with being rude, right? Like if you're direct, you just say it like it is and you say it like you feel it. And that's the way it comes out. That's the way it comes out. And that's an excuse to be rude and offensive. That's not being direct. Being direct means that I don't beat around the bush, that I'm not trying to embellish or color or taint what I'm trying to say, that I'm not trying to soften the blow by not saying exactly what I say and opening it up to interpretations that might not be what I intend to say, right? And that's the problem. The problem is not that you're trying to be sensitive to the other person's feelings. You should try to be sensitive to the other person's feelings. The problem is that most of the time, when we either keep silent or try to color something pink when it's really green, then what we're really doing is allowing the other person to misunderstand that they are closer in understanding or closer in assumption to you than you actually are. And then that's when disappointments happen, right? So when we try to beat around the bush or color things or embellish things or use softeners in order to make the conversation quote unquote flow, what we're really doing is giving the other person the impression that we agree with them when we might not, or giving the other person the impression that they're quote unquote winning, and I hate using that word, right? But that they're getting what they want when they might not be. And so it's important to be direct first and then be open to a greater discussion, right? And that has a lot to do with honesty. If you don't like something, and I was actually having a conversation with my sister about this yesterday, because she and some of her friends from high school are planning a get together next year, which I think is awesome. And one of them doesn't want to go because she's afraid of political confrontation, of conversations that might make her feel like she needs to confront this part that is really important to her. And my sister was a little taken aback by the fact that Instead of coming flat out and saying, look, guys, I'm not comfortable with this because I'm afraid this might happen, the friend was beating around the bush and trying to find other ways to say it without saying it. But when you are in honest, direct conversation, then you get to say, look, guys, I feel very strongly about X, Y, or Z. And I'm afraid that if we sit for a number of days, this is going to come up and it's going to ruin the good intention of the meeting. So I am going to sit this one out to save all of us from this because I don't know that I can keep myself from entering this conversation. Or if we can make it a point, like make it a solid promise that we're not going to touch these subjects, then I'll consider it. Right. And notice that there's no beating around the bush. There's no dancing around it. There's this element that I don't feel comfortable about, and we need to address it either this way or this way in order for me to feel comfortable going on with the conversation. Right. So you get to speak honestly and directly. If you say, for example, I don't want to have a conversation around religion, that's your right to feel that way. And nobody can tell you that you have to have this conversation. Now, you are opening it up also for people to ask you, okay, if we promise to do this, or if we did that, or why is this so important to you? Right. And then you can explain and expand. But the initial putting out of information or the initial sharing of information gets to be honest and direct. And any questions that people have, they will feel like they can ask them, or they will feel like, okay, I completely agree. I completely accept that. It's okay. You can keep that to yourself, or it's okay. We can stay away from that. Right. So they can either agree or disagree or ask further clarification if they need it. But you can't expect people to not be disappointed or for misunderstandings not to occur if you are always dancing around the bush or beating around the bush or using softeners or using the word escapes me, but using words to substitute what you really mean, right? And trying to just aphorisms, that's the word, using aphorisms to try and soften the words that you're saying. So just go to the point. I remember one time when I was still teaching, and I want to get to the fifth and bonus one, but I remember one time when I was still teaching, we were talking about something, and I said something about my dad, and somebody asked me, so what does your dad do? And I said, he's dead. And I just said it like that. I said, he's dead. And they were shocked by the fact that I just so matter of factly said, well, he's dead. Well, he is. I wasn't going to beat around the bush or dance around it. I could say, oh, he passed away or he's no longer with us. But the thing is, the fact is that he's dead and it's okay, right? So go straight to the point. And if clarification is needed, they will ask for it. And then the fifth one, which is the bonus, this is the one that if we fully embrace it and understand it, can make your conversations not just assertive from your end, but they can make it open in such a way that it will invite other people to respond in like, to be the same level of honest that you're being, and to make it so that it becomes an inviting space for everybody to feel like they have the room to be assertive and to feel like they have the right to be, right? And that fifth and bonus step is give space or create space in the conversation for others to respond in like, for others to be as assertive and as direct and as honest with you as you have been. Remember, the overarching theme here is that we get to be respected and respect. But if I am having a conversation and I believe that being assertive means that I'm talking, throwing stuff at you, telling you what I think, telling you what I believe, giving my opinions, and not stopping for enough time for the other people involved to share what they're feeling and what they are experiencing, then I am being that bulldozer, even if I'm not trying to be. Right. So as you share your points, as you share your experience, as you share your ideas, where you stand and what you want to share, as you honestly and directly share your thoughts and your ideas, pause to give time for others to do the same. Maybe even invite them directly. Like if you know somebody might be having a hard time, if you notice, remember we talk about listening with your entire body, not just listening for the words, not just listening with your ears, but listening for the context. listening for the reactions, listening for the body language, right? If you're having this conversation and the person across from you is sitting with their arms crossed, kind of scooching down in the chair and looking at you from the over their glasses if they wear glasses, or like leaning their head down a little bit, chin down, so they're looking up at you kind of. That is a clear signal that there's something that is being said that they are not doing well with, that is not sitting well with them. So to ask them directly, so and so, I am perceiving or I'm noticing that there might be something in this conversation that's making you uncomfortable. Is there any other way I should see that? Is there something you would like to express or add? Right? And they might be so bothered that they might just say, no, it's fine. Right? But then read that as well. Read that as well. And see if there can be another way. You can maybe invite someone else if it's a group conversation. Okay, so and so, what do you think? What do you believe? Especially if you can find someone that you believe might be more in agreement with that person who's closed off, and invite the conversation, right? It might just be that they're so bothered by the conversation even being brought up that they know, they're recognizing that they would be the bulldozer and they're holding themselves back. So respect that, but give them the space and let them feel that you're welcoming their point of view as well. All right. So being assertive is not about being rude or obnoxious, stubborn and unchanging. In fact, being fully assertive means that you know what you stand for and why you stand for it, but you also understand that other people have just as valuable insights into whatever it is that the conversation is, and that you're open to have a conversation in which you are heard, but you also invite other people to be heard. And we also understand that assertiveness is a continuum, and that there are moments when we will get to be more on the passive side of things, but there are moments when we will get to be more on the aggressive side of things, depending on what it is that the situation calls for. But ultimately, what we're looking for is that win-win-win for everybody that starts with understanding our own intention, assuming positive intent, understanding that what we permit persists, speaking honestly and directly, and finally, and perhaps most importantly, creating a space where everybody feels safe to do the same and to be assertive when they need to be. I hope this has been helpful. Share it with someone in your life that you know will find it helpful. And be sure to tune in next week here on Sincerely Speaking. It's been a pleasure chatting with you. This has been Marcy Amaro, and this has been Sincerely Speaking. See you next week.